Hi, Gordon. Tonight we're going to look at the compression on a 300D turbo engine, a 300D, a 240D, they're all the same. So we're going to check the compression, and in order to do that we're going to have to remove the fuel injectors. And to take the fuel injectors out, what we need is a 27 millimeter socket, and it has to be a deep socket to get over the pieces of the injector, the fuel injection system that we need. So you have to have a 27 millimeter deep socket and a couple of extensions. I'm not sure exactly how long they're going to have to be, but I've got like a 10-inch and a 4-inch extension here. And a big breaker bar because those things are torqued down pretty well. We're going to pull the injectors out. We got to pull the rack off. It just takes a 17 millimeter open-end wrench. The rack are the lines that go from the injection pump into the injectors. And there's some tubing that returns the diesel that's unused, and we're going to have to cut those off. The injectors have little barbs on there. There's no sense in trying to save those little connector hoses. So we need some new connector hose. I've got about, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet of it here. And so you have to get some new connector hose. And I've got a razor blade to cut it off, and also, of course, of primary importance to check the pressure is a pressure gauge. Now, to test the compression pressure, we need one that'll go up to at least 500 pounds. The spec on the 300D is a compression of 350 to about 430 pounds per square inch. In bars, it's 24 bars up to 30 bars. And some of these gauges read out both ways. I've got a gauge that'll read up to 1,000 psi. So you need a compression tester, and the standard compression testers for gasoline engines go up to 300 psi, so they really won't work. In addition to that, you've got to have some kind of an adapter to screw into one of 2 fittings in each one of the chambers, combustion chambers. I've got one that screws into the injection nozzle chamber. That's the 27 millimeter connection. They also make one that will go into the glow plug hole. In any case, what happens is you screw this connector into the hole where the injection nozzle was. You screw that in there, and then you just connect the pressure gauge on there, and we'll do them each in turn. What we're looking for is a difference of no more than 3 bar, which is about 15 pounds per bar is roughly the equivalent. So we want a difference of no greater than 45 psi per cylinder. So we're looking for 350 pounds per square inch up to about 435 pounds per square inch, but we don't want more than a very maximum difference of 45 psi per cylinder. We'd prefer something that's in the order of less than 20 pounds per square inch if we could get it. That just means each of the cylinders are even. We need something to spin the engine over. I've got just a little trigger. You know, all it does is make a short circuit, so we need to crank the starter with this thing from the outside. And then in addition, there are some little isolators. They're little seals. They're heat shields actually that go between the cylinder head and the injection nozzles, and we've got to replace them when we put the injection nozzles back in. While we're at it, we'll have the injection nozzles tested. As we take them out, we'll take them to some place. I use TriStar Pete. He'll check them for us, and so that we won't have to necessarily buy new injection nozzles. He'll test them for us for $10 each, and then they cost about $50 to replace if he finds a bad one. They call them the drippers, where they're not spraying good spray pattern on the diesel fuel. So let's get to that and take the rack off first. Now, we checked the compression at operating temperature, so we've had this thing running. It's a little hot. We just pulled it in here, but the preferred way is to have it at operating temperature. And so first thing we have to do is pull what they call the rack off of the thing. And the rack means this system of lines that goes from the injection pump into each of the nozzles. There's 5 lines, and I've got a 17 millimeter open end wrench. And so we have to loosen basically 10 connections, one on each of the injection nozzles, one on each of the injection pumps. We're just going to loosen those things up, take them all off, and then we're going to have to cut those lines, those ones with barbs. Each one of these little black hoses that runs from one injection nozzle to the next, we're just going to take a razor blade and cut those things off of there. So first of all, what I generally do is just loosen up all the lines. Okay, so now we've got this rack. You see, I loosened up those 10, and I never loosen these little bolts. You don't want to mess up, you know, exactly how that thing is situated. So just take it all off at once. Now you're going to have a little diesel fuel drip out of there, but it's no problem. We're going to have to clear these lines back out of the air when we put it back together, and that's going to be a real critical step. But for now, we'll just set this rack aside, what they call a rack. We'll just we need to get these lines off of here, and as I say, there's just no way that you're gonna save them, so you just cut them off of there, you know, and you can use a razor blade, or you could use a Dykes. Actually, somebody has left us a lot of line in each case, so we've probably saved this line just because there's so much of it that somebody has left us. So we'll just see. I'll use a pair of Dykes and just cut it off real close to the end of the nipple. And that way, we might be able to salvage some of it. It doesn't cost that much, but no sense wasting it. This looks like it's pretty new. So if you just cut it as close as you can, oops, well, maybe it's not so new. That's coming off of there pretty easy. Normally it doesn't. Come off that easily normally, so this must be kind of old and rotten line. Now we're ready to pull out the injectors. We got to pull them all out at once. When we check compression, we can't have any back pressure on any of those cylinders, so we got to pull out all the injection lines simultaneously, and they're real easy to get out of there. So that's the fuel injector. Just take them out, set them aside. Once we get them all out of there, we can check the injection pressure on each one. Or I'm sorry, the compression. The compression is what we're testing. Okay, so what we want to do is test each cylinder in succession. So we've got a plug, a fitting that fits into the hole where the injection nozzle was. And so what we want to do is screw this fitting into each one of these holes where the injection nozzle was, tighten it up a bit, and then we're going to do them in succession. Now you notice you can hear a car in the background. I've got another car running, so I'm charging this battery. I want a lot of power so that I make sure that I don't run this battery down as I'm spinning this engine over. So I've got something in the background. You need some kind of a charger. It's best to hook up some kind of a charging system so that you make sure you get plenty of power on that starter to turn this engine over. So now the compression tester is just a little slide-on connection to that fitting. And now what I want to do is spin the engine over. The book says at least 8 times. In addition, what I want to do is make sure that I don't have the engine start, and I don't want fuel injected into the engine. So I'm going to push the shut-off valve on this thing, and simultaneously I've got a connection hooked up to crank the engine over. So you see, I'm going to simultaneously hold that shut and listen. Now that first cylinder came out really well. Boy, it's right at the top mark. So it's running over 400 pounds, you can see. That's outstanding compression on that number 1 cylinder. Let's hope they're all like that. So now, we're simply going to take this plug out of this hole, move it to the next one. Now, that was, I should record it while I'm doing it. That was right at about 420 pounds of compression on that cylinder. Now let's look at the next one. We hope that it's running real close to that. So I just move it to that second cylinder, tighten up the connection, and do the same thing. Now you see, I'm going to make a little bit of a mess. I'm not going to shut that injection pump off altogether. So I got a little diesel running out here. Okay, let's look at this one. Well, it's running almost 400. It's right up to 390. So we're running still pretty strong. That kind of compression is just outstanding on an engine that's got over 200,000 miles on it. So that one we said was 390. Now you can see we're blowing a little. I see we're running right at 410 on that cylinder. So we're still running real strong. Putting it up there for the camera's sake. Yeah, again, we're running 410. Now there's a release valve on that. I should be hitting it every time before I release that pressure. So that one's running 410. Again, we'll push that stop. And that was running 410 also. So we've got outstanding compression on this engine. It's running over 400 pounds. It's supposed to be between 350 and 435. So this engine was a little lethargic. It's not accelerating the way we want. Could be a couple of things wrong. The most likely thing wrong at this point is those injectors may be somewhat plugged up, and it's causing us some problems in terms of just injection. We're not getting the right kind of spray into the cylinders more than likely. We'll check them out while we got them out of here. Okay, Gordon, we just checked the compression on this engine, as you recall, and in the meantime, while we had these injectors out, we had them checked. We found one bad injector. Now we're going to replace the one bad one and put all new ones in there. So we've got the injectors in, and the heat shields are underneath them, and so we want to torque these things down. They torque to 52 to 59 foot-pounds, which is 70 to 80 Newton meters. So I've set my torque wrench up. Kind of prefer the high end of that range. You'll be able to feel those seals kind of crush underneath the torque of the wrench, and you may understand that really that's not that much torque. And now we have to put the return hose on there, and I certainly, you got to put new return hose. You have to cut that old stuff to get it off. Now, as you recall, the injector that's closest to the passenger's compartment is plugged. So we've just got a little piece of tubing there, and we're going to put that on the very end one, and I push from the top. And those things are not that difficult to get on. And then what I typically do is just push the next one on and measure over, give it a little slack so there's no kink in it. Not so much that it gets in the way though. A few inches. And all we're going to do is each one in turn. Now this one happens to go underneath the linkage. As you recall, there's a little notch. So we want this one underneath that linkage there. And if we look, I got it wrong side of that piece of linkage. If we look right there, you may be able to see that little notch. I'm going to get it out of the way of this control linkage and then bring it up, and perhaps go to the back side of that is the easiest. Okay, now we had all that linkage off of there, all that throttle linkage. We're going to leave it off until we get this rack back on. And notice we've run all of our lines. We've jumpered one to the next, and then the very last one, and you can feed either side of the fuel injector, but the very last one comes up here to a connection right on the fuel filter right here, and it goes underneath that that linkage for the cruise control system. So what I always do is just lay that rack up there on it and tighten up the bottom ones, get them started, and get the top ones started too. So you need all 10 of them loosely started. You have to fiddle with it a little bit. And then I tighten the 5 on the bottom on the injection pump, leave the ones loose up on the injectors, and then turn the car over and evacuate the lines, get the air out of the lines. And once I get the air out of the lines, then I tighten them up. So first things first, get the thing started. What I always do before I put this linkage back together, and I'm about to tighten up these injection lines, but I thought I'd put the linkage back now, is I just take a little thing of grease with a brush applicator, and I just brush those balls up a little bit, those little joints right there, just so that linkage is real free. You certainly don't want the linkage to hang up on a diesel. You might put a little dab on that right there too. So now we're ready to clear this thing of air. So what we've done is we've hooked up all the injection lines, and we made the 5 connections on the injection pump, the 17 millimeter nuts, tight. But we've got the lines loose up here, and of course these lines have air in them, and we got to evacuate that air. So what I generally do is just hook up the little switch to my connections over there where the starter is, and just crank the engine over a little bit. And Gordon, I don't know whether you'll be able to see when we get some diesel out of these lines, but each one of these is loose. Just turn this engine over until we can get some fuel out of each one of those. You see it's trying to start almost. If you can see, I got a little fuel pushing out of each one of those lines. Now I'm ready to tighten them up, and it ought to crank right up.